you are probably aware that there are 17 sustainable development goals with horizon, what is it called, sunset of 2030, and SDG 7 is about energy, access to clean energy, clean cooking energy, and so on and so forth. I have podcasts on SDGs if you want to follow up. I wanted to go through this report, which is now few months old, from the IEA IRENA, United Nations Statistics Division, World Bank, World Health Organization, and so on, which track SDG 7, the Energy Progress Report 2023. The data tends to be a couple of years behind because you cannot really get global data that quickly. So we'll just look at an executive summary with a couple of figures, and as usual, I'm very brief on these things, so you have to follow up if you're interested in the details. What's the overview? Since its inception in 2018, tracking SDG 7, the Energy Progress Report, has become the global reference point for information on the realization of SDG 7. It is produced annually by five of the custodian agencies responsible for tracking global progress toward Sustainable Development Goal 7, which is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy, which generally means very low carbon intensity or no carbon renewable energies, right? The custodians developing the report are the International Energy Agency, the International Renewable Energy Agency, United Nations Statistics Division, the World Bank, and the World Health Organization. The report offers the international community a global summary of progress on energy access, energy efficiency, renewable energy, clean cooking, international cooperation to advance SDG 7. It presents updated statistics for each of the indicators and provides policy insights on priority areas and actions needed to spur further progress on SDG 7 as well as related SDGs. Health, water, food, all are related to energy. Figure ES1 we'll just see offers, as executive summary 1 offers, an updated snapshot of the primary indicators for the most recent year. I'll come back to this. Is ES1. Let me do this then. So here are the indicators. We'll read a bit more before I go back and read a bit more. So here are the indicators. So proportion of population with access to electricity. How have we done? 1.1 billion was the number of people without access to electricity in 2010. Latest year 2021 had 675 million people without access to electricity, so we cut it by half, which is great. Proportion of population with primary reliance on clean fuels and technology for cooking was at 2.9 billion in terms of people without access to clean cooking. We brought that down to 2.3 billion in 2021. Is that great? Well, we could do much better, obviously, but remember we had the pandemic in the middle before 2021 or during 2021, so we have to understand what the impacts of those were, and then there are a lot of political perturbations, wars always going on, political unrest, and so on. Renewable energy share in total final energy consumption was 16% in terms of share of total final energy consumption from renewables in 2010, jumped to 19.1% by 2020. And energy intensity measured as a ratio of primary energy and GDP. So primary energy here is basically fossil fuels. It was 5.53 megajoule. Yeah, that should be megajoules per US dollar. Primary energy intensity by 2020. So 2020 that dropped to 4.63 megajoules per US dollar. So primary energy intensity did drop, which is good sign. We'll see that renewable energy share is going up. There are other issues of finance, access to technology, and sometimes renewables depend on whether you do have solar number of sunny days and winds to support solar and wind, right? So international financial flows to developing countries in support of clean energy research and development and renewable energy production, including in hybrid systems, was at 11.9 11.9 billion US dollars. International financial flows to developing countries in support of clean energy actually went down to 10.8 billion. We'll see a figure of this. This is a tricky part where the global leadership on mitigation focuses on emissions reductions, and obviously we haven't been reducing emissions. In fact, we are still accelerating, not just increasing the emissions. Renewable energies are a big part of it, so unless everybody is brought on board, that's emission reduction and mitigation are not going to happen. But this requires a lot of international financial flows to developing countries so that they can play their part in reducing emissions. But that's a 2-step forward, 10-step back kind of a situation most of the time. So despite some progress across indicators, the current pace is not adequate to achieve any of the 2030 SDG targets. As in previous years, rates of progress vary significantly across regions, with some regions making substantial gains and some slowing their progress or even moving backward. So India, China generally come up as doing well among the developing countries. Among the major economic factors impeding the realization of SDG 7 globally are the uncertain macroeconomic outlook, high levels of inflation, currency fluctuations, debt distress in a growing number of countries, lack of financing, supply chain bottlenecks, tighter fiscal circumstances, and soaring prices for materials. I've discussed elsewhere the critical minerals and materials and elements needed for renewable energies and EVs and so on, and few countries own these things in terms of just the resource availability. It's lithium, cobalt, nickel, whatever you can think of. The effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and the steady rise in energy price since summer 2021 are expected to be a further drag on progress, particularly in the most vulnerable countries and those that were already lagging behind. So I will, since this report comes out annually, I'll probably revisit this maybe in 2025 to see how we are doing. So I'll add it as an annex to this podcast series. Although certain policy responses to the global energy crisis appear likely to improve the outlook for renewable and energy efficiency, other necessary policy actions as well as financial flows continue to lag. This particularly concerns lacking universal access to electricity and clean cooking in developing economies, with projections indicating that SDG 7 will not be reached by 2030. We'll look at maps of where the problems persist in terms of access to electricity and clean cooking. This year marks the midpoint of the implementation of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The picture on progress since the adoption of the agenda in 2015 is mixed. Target 7.1 on ensuring universal access to affordable, reliable and modern energy services is off track, with an estimated 675 million people still without access to electricity and 2.3 billion without access to clean cooking in 2021 that we just saw in the table. Current trends suggest that the world's shot on the target will fall very wide off the mark in 2030. Maybe I can stop here. This is about 10 minutes long. Or maybe let me read one more so that we are keeping this to 2 podcasts instead of stretching to 3 or 4. This year marks the midpoint of the implementation of the 2030 UN Agenda. So we already said this. I don't know why I repeated that, but it happens sometimes. The uptake of renewable energy, target 7.2, has grown since 2010, as we'll see, but efforts must be scaled up to substantially increase the share of renewables in total final energy consumption. Likewise, despite steady progress, the rate of improvement in energy efficiency is not on track to double by 2030, with the current trend of 1.8% falling short of the targeted increase in efficiency of 2.6% each year between 2010 and 2030. So as renewables keep ramping up, existing technology can be made more efficient, and there are many calculations made by several groups on impacts of improving efficiencies on emissions, and that is significantly achievable. Reduction can be significant if we deploy all the potential efficiencies. There are many socio-economic transitions issues there in terms of cost. Somebody was telling me yesterday they have a clean cooking stove, but it costs 2,500 rupees. Not many rural families will buy a cooking stove for 2,500 rupees. So how do you incentivize people to do that transition is not always very straightforward. To make up for the lack of progress, improvements would need to accelerate further from now to 2030. I am recording this in August of 2024, and this report was written last year, so we already need to have made some progress. Finally, progress on target 7.8 to increase international public financial flows supporting clean energy in developing countries began to decline even before the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, with financial resources more than a third lower since 2020 than the average of the previous decade from 2010 to 2019. This is really, really tricky. Who is going to care enough of the global problems like global emissions, global warming, etc., to provide financial aid to the countries that need to ramp up their modern energy systems? As financial flows have contracted for the third year in a row, they have become increasingly concentrated in a small number of countries. The decreasing trend in international public financial flows may delay achievement of SDG 7, especially for the least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing countries. Okay, so we looked at this already, and we'll come back and read a few of the indicators like access to electricity and so on in the next podcast. Okay, so some good news, but you can mostly see it as less bad news than great good news, right? So falling behind on the target sunset of 2030 just means, remember, SDGs came out of the Millennium Development Goals, and now will we need something else from 2030, which would be okay, but it just means that we are not at all on target to meeting the sustainability goals, emissions reductions goals, global warming targets, net zero goals, and so on and so forth. Okay, we'll come back and wrap it up in the next podcast. Okay.